All right, so today's lesson is going to focus a little bit on clarification for our note-taking strategy and then a read aloud of our actual article. First, when we talk about our note-taking, I'm going to walk you through each step and also draw out some more details to help clarify any questions you might have. For the reading, when I start reading, you'll notice that I'll stop at each page, and that's going to be the point where you gist what happened on each page. The gisting is going to be important for your notes, which will come together at the end of this explanation. So the first thing, you're going to have many articles through this unit, and each of them need to have some kind of note taken, especially to determine its credibility. When we talk about credibility, we want to make sure that it is unbiased, meaning that it doesn't lean towards one way or the other. It's only factual information, that it is accurate. That could be statistics. It could be coming from sources that are actually in our list of reliability, but also it could be something along the lines that you know to be true through any facts of your own background knowledge, things of that. Also, is it reliable and is it relevant? So going to the notes, you're going to make sure that you label what exactly source you're referring to. So today we're going to be focusing on source 2. Your job is to fill in these pieces of information. That's all this is who is the author, which page numbers of the pink packet, who our publisher is, and of course our publication date, which can be found in the article itself. When we read, we gist. The gisting can come at different parts. Tonight's reading is going to be at the end of every page. You are literally going to take those gists and you are going to put them here and write down any pieces of important information that stood out from your first read. The one thing that you need to know, in order for these to be quality pieces of information placed into the packet, your gists have to be quality. So make sure you are only giving us the most relevant, reliable, accurate information from the article. After that, you're going to give us a general response, just one sentence, those 5 to 7 words of how does this support working conditions and their issues in varying countries. Make sure it's a complete sentence too. This is going to go back to what our overall research questions could be when we create our brochure. Is the source credible? Rate on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being credible, 1 being not credible. Refer back to that handout from last week where it says incredible does not equal credible. That will help you to decide whether or not the article or source is a 1 through 10. Flipping the page, this is where it becomes a little bit more specific. What you are going to do here where it says write a question that this source can answer to be applied to other sources. It's a question that you write connecting about working conditions. For example, are working conditions in the factory similar to other working conditions around the country? It could be, are employees compensated in a fair amount way in this company or factory compared to other companies around the world? Okay. Then what you're going to do is you're going to find 3 quotes that help to answer that. You write the quote down, then you're going to paraphrase it. Include the page number from the pink packet. Okay. Then you'll do the same 2 more times. Remember, these quotes are supporting your question here. Okay. After that, you are just going to take your paraphrase and you're going to scaffold it into a statement. Okay. Choose the best 2 from here. Any 2 that are your best. And what you will do is you will literally take them and bring them down here, whichever 2 are the best. Then you're going to write statements according to whoever our author is, illustrates, and then your paraphrase. It's as simple as that. Let's flip to page 17 of our packet. Page 17 of our packet is going to be our second source. An apparel factory defies sweatshop label, but can it thrive by Stephen Greenhouse. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read each page. After I've read each page, I am going to pause. That is where you will stop this video or pause this video to write your gist. Then you'll go on to every page up to page 22. After I've done reading, you are going to go ahead and begin the note-taking process. Okay. Sitting in her tiny living room here, Santa Castillo beams about the new house that she and her husband are building directly behind the wooden shack where they now live. The new home will be 4 times bigger, with 2 bedrooms and an indoor bathroom. The couple and their 3 children now share a windowless bedroom and rely on an outhouse 2 doors away. Ms. Castillo had long dreamed of a bigger, sturdier house. But 3 months ago, something happened that finally made it possible. She landed a job at one of the world's most unusual garment factories. Industry experts say it is a pioneer in the developing world because it pays a living wage. In this case, 3 times the average wage of the country's apparel workers, and allows workers to join a union without a fight. We never had the opportunity to make wages like this before, says Ms. Castillo, a soft-spoken woman who earns $500 a month. I feel blessed. The factory is a high-minded experiment, a response to appeals from myriad university officials and student activists that the garment industry stop using poverty wage sweatshops. It has 120 employees and is known by Knights Apparel, a privately held company based in Spartanburg, South Carolina, that is the leading supplier of college logo apparel to American universities, according to the Collegiate Licensing Company. For Knights, the factory is a risky proposition, even though it already has orders to make T-shirts and sweatshirts for bookstores at 400 American universities. The question is whether students, alumni, and sports fans will be willing to pay $18 for the factory's T-shirts. The same as premium brands like Nike and Adidas to sustain the plant in its generous wages. Joseph Bozich, the CEO of Knights, is optimistic. We're hoping to prove that doing good can be good business, that they're not mutually exclusive, he says. Not everyone is so confident. It's a noble effort, but it is an experiment, says Andrew Jasson, an industry consultant who says fair labor garments face a limited market unless deft promotion can snare consumers' attention and conscience. There are consumers who really care and will buy this apparel at a premium price, he says. And then there are those who say they care, but then just want value. Mr. Bozich says the plant's T-shirts and sweats should command a premium because the company uses high-quality fabric, design, and printing. At this time, you want to take a minute to gist. In the factory previous incarnation, a Korean-owned company, BJ&B, made baseball caps for Nike and Reebok before shutting it in 2007 and moving the operation to lower-wage countries. Today, the reborn factory is producing under a new label, Alta Gracia, named after the poverty-ridden town as well as the Virgin of Alta Gracia, revered as a protector of the Dominicans. Alta Gracia translates to exalted grace. This sometimes seems too good to be true, says Jim Wilkerson, Duke University's director of licensing and a leader of American University's fair labor movement. He said a few other apparel companies have tried to improve working conditions, like Schoolhouse, which was founded by a 25-year-old Duke graduate and uses a factory in Sri Lanka. Worker advocates applaud these efforts, but many say Alta Gracia has gone further than others by embracing higher wages and unionization. A living wage is generally defined as the amount of money needed to adequately feed and shelter a family. What really counts is not what happens with this factory over the next 6 months, Mr. Wilkerson says. It's what happens 6 years or 10 years from now. We want badly for this to live on. Santa Castillo agrees. She and many coworkers toiled at the other factories for the minimum wage, currently $147 a month in this country's free trade zones, where most apparel factories are located. That amount, worker after worker lamented in interviews for this article, falls woefully short of supporting a family. The Alta Gracia factory has pledged to pay employees nearly 3.5 times the prevailing minimum wage, based on a study done by workers' rights groups and calculated living costs for a family of 4 in the Dominican Republic. While some critics view the living wage as do-gooder mumbo-jumbo, Ms. Castillo views it as a godsend. In her years earning the minimum wage, she said she felt stuck on a treadmill, never able to advance, often borrowing to buy necessities. A lot of times there was only enough for my kids and I'd go to bed hungry, she says. But now I have money to buy meat, oatmeal, and milk. With higher wages, she says, her family can move up in the world. She is now able to borrow $1,000 to begin building her future home and feels able to fulfill her dreams of becoming a minister at her local evangelical church. Pause to gist. I hope God will continue to bless the people who brought this factory to our community, she says. In many ways, the factory owes its existence to an incident a decade ago when Joe Bozich was attending his son's high school basketball game. His vision suddenly became blurred and he could hardly make out his son on the court. A day later, he couldn't read. A doctor told him the only thing that would cause his vision to deteriorate so rapidly was a brain tumor. So he went in for an MRI. My doctor said the good news is you don't have a brain tumor, but the bad news is you have multiple sclerosis, he says. For the 3 days, he couldn't see. He worried that he would be relegated to a wheelchair and a ventilator and wouldn't be able to support his family. At the same time, a close friend and his brother died, and then one of his children began suffering from anxiety. I thought of people who were going through the same thing as my child and me. Mr. Bozich recalls. Fortunately, we had the resources for medical help, and I thought of all the families that didn't. I started thinking that I wanted to do something more important with my business than worry just about winning market shares, he adds. That seemed kind of empty after what I've been through. I wanted to find a way to use my business to impact people that it touched on a daily basis. He regained his full vision after 3 weeks and says he hasn't suffered any further attacks. Shortly after Mr. Bozich recovered, Knights Apparel set up a charity, We Care, that supports a home for orphans and abused children. But he says he wants to do more. A national collegiate bodybuilding champion at Vanderbilt, Mr. Bozich was hired by Gold's Gym after graduation and later founded a unit in the company that sold Gold's apparel to outside retailers. Building on that experience, Mr. Bozich started Knights Apparel in 2000. Still solidly built at 47, he has made apparel deals with the scores of universities, enabling Knights to surpass Nike at the #1 college supplier. Under Mr. Bozich, Knights cooperates closely with the Workers' Rights Consortium, a group of 186 universities that press factories making college logo apparel to treat workers fairly. Pause. Scott Nova, the consortium's executive director, says Mr. Bozich seems far more committed than most other apparel executives to stamping out abuses, like failure to pay for overtime work. Knights contracts with 30 factories worldwide. At a meeting that the two men had in 2005 to address problems at a Philippines factory, Mr. Bozich floated the idea of opening a model factory. Mr. Nova loved the idea. He was frustrated that most apparel factories worldwide still paid the minimum wage or only a fraction above, rarely enough to lift families out of poverty. Minimum wages are 15 cents an hour in Bangladesh and around 85 cents in the Dominican Republic and many cities in China. The Alta Gracia factory pays $2.83 an hour. Mr. Bozich first considered opening a factory in Haiti, but was dissuaded by the country's poor infrastructure. Mr. Nova urged him to consider this depressed community, hoping that he would employ some of the 1,200 people thrown out of work when the Korean-owned Cap factory closed. Mr. Bozich turned to a longtime industry executive, Donnie Hodge, a former executive with J.P. Havens, Milken, and Gerber Children's Wear. Overseeing a $500,000 renovation of the factory, Mr. Hodge, now president of Knights, called for bright lighting, 5 sewing lines, and pricey ergonomic chairs, which many seamstresses thought were for the managers. We could have given the community a check for $25,000 or $50,000 a year and felt good about that, Mr. Hodge said, but we wanted to make this a sustainable thing. The factory's biggest hurdle is self-imposed, how to compete with other apparel makers when its wages are so much higher. Mr. Bozich says the factory's cost will be $4.80 a t-shirt, 80 cents or 20 cents more than if it paid minimum wage. Knights will absorb a lower than usual profit margin, he said, without asking retailers to pay more at the wholesale. Obviously, we'll have a higher cost, Mr. Bozich said, but we're pricing the product such that we're not asking the retailer or the consumer to sacrifice in order to support it. Knights plans to sell the tees for $8 wholesale, with most retailers marking them up to $18. Pause and gist. We think it's priced right and has a tremendous message, and it's going to be marketed like crazy, says Joel Friedman, Vice President of General Merchandise at Barnes & Noble College Booksellers. He says Barnes & Noble will at first have smaller than usual profit margins on the garments because it will spend heavily to promote them through a web campaign, large signs in its stores, and other methods. It helps to have many universities backing the project. Duke alone placed a $250,000 order and will run full-page ads in the campus newspaper, put postcards in the student mailboxes, and hang promotional signs on light poles. Barnes & Noble plans to have Alta Gracia's tees and sweats at bookstores on 180 campuses by September and at 350 this winter, while Follett, the other giant college bookstore operator, plans to sell the tees on 85 campuses this fall. Still, this new unknown brand could face problems being sold alongside Nike and Adidas gear. They have to brand this well, simply, clearly, and elegantly, so college students can understand it very fast, says Kelly A. McElhenney, a professor of corporate social responsibility at the University of California, Berkeley. A lot of college students would much rather pay for a brand that shows workers are treated well. Nike and Adidas officials said their companies have sought to improve workers' welfare through increased wages and by belonging to the Fair Labor Association, a monitoring group that seeks to end sweatshop conditions. A Nike spokesman said his company would watch with interest the Knight's initiative. To promote its gear, Knight is preparing a video to be shown at bookstores and a web documentary, both highlighting the improvements in workers' lives. The t-shirts will have hanging tags with pictures of Alta Gracia employees in the message, "Your purchase will change our lives." The tags will also contain an endorsement from the Worker Rights Consortium, which has never before backed a brand. In a highly unusual move, United Students Against Sweatshops, a nationwide college group that often lambaste apparel factories, plans to distribute flyers at college bookstores urging freshmen to buy Alta Gracia shirts. "We're going to do everything we can to promote this," says Casey Sweeney, a leader of the group at Cornell. "It's incredible that I can wear a Cornell hoodie knowing the workers who made it are being paid well and being respected." Pause and gist. One such worker is Maritza Vargas. When BJ&B ran the factory, she was a stand-up for your rights firebrand fighting for 20 union supporters who had been fired. Student groups in the Worker Rights Consortium pressed Nike and other companies that used the factory to push BJ&B to recognize the union and rehire the fired workers. BJ&B relented. Today, Ms. Vargas is president of the union in the new plant and sings a very different tune. In interviews, she and other union leaders praised the Alta Gracia factory and said they would do their utmost to make it succeed and grow. Mariah Perez said that living wage would enable her to send her 16-year-old daughter to college, while Yolando Simon said she was able to pay off a $300 debt to a grocer. At other factories, workers said managers sometimes yelled and slapped them. Several said they were not allowed to go home when sick, and sometimes had to work past midnight after beginning at 7:30 a.m. Comparing this factory with other ones, Ms. Vargas said, "The difference is heaven and earth." Pause and gist. One thing you want to know, some of the information that you'll need for publication date and time will be located at the end of the article. Now, just to review the notes, you will fill this information in. Don't forget, you can get these pieces at the end of the article. Your gist can go here. You may add as many bullets as you need to. Answer this question, 1 through 10. 10, how credible it is. Don't forget to use your credible source. Write your own question, quotes from the article that support this question with the paraphrase. So quote, paraphrase, page number. You're going to choose 2 of your 3 paraphrases, and you're simply going to copy them down here, then turn them into statements. According to our author, he observes, and then your paraphrase from up here. Let me know if you have any questions.